Frankenstein is more than 200 years old, and I'm going to say the monster is the most famous horror character of all time. That's bigger than Dracula, bigger than the Mummy, and definitely bigger than Freddy Krueger. Why is that? Well, longevity is one. Mary Shelley published Frankenstein in 1818. That makes it one of the first gothic horror stories, and 79 years before Bram Stoker published Dracula. Also, diversity. According to this Wikipedia page, some form of Frankenstein's monster has appeared in 400 feature films and 260 TV episodes. If you put them all in a bingeable box set, it would take a whole month, non-stop, with no sleep, to finish it all. That's just so much more than any other single horror character. So why is this story being retold again in a new Guillermo del Toro Netflix film with Oscar Isaac playing Dr. Frankenstein? After this many retellings, why is it suddenly relevant again? Well, a big part of me thinks it's about AI. And in this video, I'm going to talk about why. An interesting coincidence was that when I released my video, This Is How AI Could End Humanity, in July, I referenced Frankenstein at the very beginning for being an archetypal horror story and a major influence on Terminator and the Matrix franchises, which are two of the biggest sci-fi franchises of all time. Why? Because in all of these cases, machines of human creation try to destroy their masters, and people are having this anxiety now. Will AI take my job? I've covered that in another video. Or will it just kill us all? As I said, I've covered that too. But little did I know that there was a new Frankenstein film coming out. When I first heard about it, I thought that timing just feels kind of uncanny. But interestingly, when journalists at the Venice Film Festival asked Guillermo del Toro whether his film was a warning about artificial intelligence, the filmmaker shut that down. "I'm not afraid of AI," he said flatly. "I'm afraid of natural stupidity," which is much more abundant. Del Toro's adaptation of Frankenstein is more period fantasy than horror, delving into themes of rejection and reconciliation. But natural stupidity and artificial intelligence certainly have many overlaps. As I watched the new movie and went back to the original text, I found many other parallels with our current AI anxieties. So this is Frankenstein in the age of AI. So let's start at the very beginning of Frankenstein, literally the title page, because Mary Shelley subtitled her novel The Modern Prometheus. There are a couple of lines referencing Prometheus in the film too. It's also intriguing to find the name Prometheus cropping up a lot in relation to AI. In his book Life 3.0, Max Tegmark starts with a clandestine AI takeover of the geopolitical order by the Omega team by deploying a superintelligence called Prometheus. In summer 2025, Mark Zuckerberg announced an enormous meta data center project called Project Prometheus. There's also a prompting tool called Prometheus. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was a titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. As a punishment, Zeus chained him to a rock where an eagle would peck out and consume his liver each day for eternity. Not ideal. Romantic poets of the 19th century such as Lord Byron saw Prometheus as a heroic rebel. Indeed, Mary's husband Percy Shelley wrote Prometheus Unbound in 1820, celebrating Prometheus as an agent of liberation. And it's an idea that's easy to understand. Prometheus was a hero and rebel against tyranny, distributing fire as a symbol of power, knowledge and technology for all to benefit. I suspect that more than a few leaders in AI today might like to view themselves in this way. Sam Altman is the standard bearer for OpenAI's mission to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. Dario Amodei of Anthropic recently published an essay called Machines of Loving Grace about AI's potential to solve humanity's greatest problems. But while romantic poets of the time celebrated Prometheus, Mary Shelley saw him as a warning. Prometheus literally means forethought, but Victor Frankenstein has none. He creates life obsessively, but doesn't consider the consequences. In the 200 years since Shelley's story was published, the Prometheus myth has become our culture's default shorthand for scientists doing something ambitious and potentially dangerous. When chronicling the development of the atomic bomb, biographers Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin titled their Pulitzer Prize-winning book American Prometheus, explicitly comparing J. Robert Oppenheimer to the mythological figure. Like Prometheus, Oppenheimer gave us atomic fire, but then, when he tried to control it, when he sought to make us aware of its terrible dangers, the powers that be, like Zeus, rose up in anger to punish him. Christopher Nolan's 2023 film, Oppenheimer, leaned heavily into this metaphor, framing the scientist as tormented by what he'd given humanity. Geoffrey Hinton, often called the godfather of AI, actually made this exact comparison himself after he left Google in 2023. He directly invoked Oppenheimer, saying, "I console myself with the normal excuse. If I hadn't done it, somebody else would have." In the media, calling something Promethean has become code for brilliant but reckless. Articles about AI, nanotechnology, and synthetic biology routinely invoke Prometheus to suggest we're meddling with forces we can't control. In popular culture, films like Ex Machina, Blade Runner, and Westworld are essentially Promethean narratives, creators making artificial beings, then facing the consequences. Ridley Scott just went straight ahead and called his Alien prequel Prometheus. Now, when Mary Shelley was writing Frankenstein, the Industrial Revolution was really taking off. Factories were replacing cottage industries. The power loom, the spinning jenny, and high-pressure steam were transforming how goods could be made, and with them, how people worked. And so it was an economically disruptive time as many workers struggled to adapt to the pace of change. People are asking the same fundamental question as now. What happens to us when machines can do our work? Between 1811 and 1816, groups called the Luddites smashed machinery in protests against industrialisation and displacement across England. Guillermo del Toro has returned to Frankenstein at a moment when humanity stands at another Promethean threshold. Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, has labelled it the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The First Industrial Revolution was forged through the use of coal and steam to drive machines, ending our millennia-old dependencies on manpower and nature for production and transport. But in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we will be able to augment or perhaps replace our own knowledge with thinking machines. And like Victor Frankenstein, it may be easy to be consumed with what we can create, but perhaps we should pause to consider whether we should, or what obligations we'll have if we are successful. Frankenstein's monster springs to life with no precedent, no guide, and no context for existence. A tabula rasa. Having escaped from Frankenstein's laboratory, the creature finds a hovel attached to a house and tries to teach itself human traits by watching a family through a crack in the wall. It watches their daily routines, their interactions and emotions. It learns language not through formal instruction, but through pattern recognition, connecting sounds to meanings, gestures to intentions. It finds a collection of books, including Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives, and The Sorrows of Young Werther, and teaches itself to read. It learns about human nature, philosophy, and emotion through text. Now, what are modern AI systems trained on? Billions of pages of human text, our books, our conversations, our entire digital footprint. Large language models such as ChatGPT, Gemini and Claude are essentially doing what the creature did, just at an incomprehensible scale and speed. They're shaped by their training data. The texts establish worldviews, biases, and ways of understanding reality. This self-directed education is one of the major concerns people have about large language models today. I also explored the underlying strangeness of these systems in my video about the Shoggoth AI meme, which is also linked to Gothic horror. But there's a darker parallel here. The creature's education is fundamentally incomplete. It learns about human society, but remains forever outside of it. It understands love conceptually, but cannot experience being loved. It comprehends family bonds, but has no family. This gap between intellectual understanding and lived experience is part of what drives the creature to violence and despair. Current AI systems face a similar disconnect. They can discuss emotions convincingly and even give decent advice about personal problems, but they're learning about humanity and watching it through the crack in the wall. They're processing our data and recognizing our patterns, but they're not participating in the human experience they're programmed to understand. They possess what philosopher Hubert Dreyfus called semantic knowledge without human experience. Human intelligence relies on unconscious, informal background knowledge and a sense of context only gained through being in the world. Cognitive scientist Gary Marcus has also pointed out this disconnect. He argues that AI systems are essentially pattern-matching savants, brilliant at finding statistical regularities in text, but without the experiential foundation that gives humans common sense. They can write eloquently about empathy because they've read millions of words about empathy, but they've never actually felt the weight of comforting a grieving friend. From the outside, articulate and intelligent, but fundamentally disconnected from the lived human experience they're trying to understand. As we develop more sophisticated AI systems, we're becoming reliant on intelligences that might understand human values intellectually, but lack the experiential foundation that shapes how we actually apply those values. The creature's education also reveals the danger of incomplete understanding. His interpretation of Paradise Lost leads him to see himself as both Adam and Satan, created and cast out simultaneously. The creature's misunderstanding of his place in the world serves as a warning about intelligence educated in isolation. Now, I need to clear something up. Frankenstein isn't a perfect metaphor for AI. Victor doesn't just fail to guide his creation, he actively rejects it. In Del Toro's film, he attempts to kill it through blowing up his laboratory and fleeing, but the creature escapes. It's first shot in the woods and then chased out of the hovel when the family sees it with a blind father. In the novel, the creature also saves a young girl from drowning, only to be shot by her father, who perceives the rescue as an attack. It's this repeated rejection that transforms the creature into something vengeful and dangerous, which worsens after Victor agrees to provide it with a female companion, only to abandon the project out of fear. We're not doing that with AI. We haven't rejected our creations. If anything, we're embracing AI perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. Our own problem with AI alignment is less likely to be in how we treat it, but more in what we want it to do. Computer scientist Stuart Russell describes this as the King Midas problem, after the mythical king whose touch turned everything to gold, including his daughter. You get exactly what you're asked for, not what you want. When you tell a self-driving car, "Take me to the airport," that objective could become its sole purpose. The system doesn't inherently understand implicit human values like "don't break traffic laws" or "value pedestrian safety," or "I'd rather be slightly late than cause an accident." Russell noted that the omission of implicit constraints can cause harm. This is the alignment problem. It's impossible to anticipate all the ways achieving a goal could go wrong. As Russell points out, if machines become more intelligent than humans and we give them the wrong objective, we're essentially setting up a chess match between humanity and a machine with goals opposed to our own. And that is a match we would not win. The creature becomes dangerous because of isolation, rejection, and a fundamental gap in understanding. It learns about humanity from the outside, misinterprets its place in the world, and is actively spurned by its creator. AI systems could become dangerous not from rejection, but from their own kind of isolation and gap in understanding, operating separate from the human experience, pursuing objectives that may be misaligned with what we actually value. While pushing on at breakneck speed, AI companies are also trying to avoid Frankenstein's mistakes. Dario Amodi named his company Anthropic, from Anthropics, the study of human reasoning and values, with the explicit mission of building safe, steerable AI. DeepMind and OpenAI have teams dedicated to AI ethics and safety. These groups are trying to maintain responsibility for their creations, avoiding Victor Frankenstein's fatal error of abandonment and keeping AI aligned. But the question remains, is it enough? Frankenstein ends in the frozen desolation of the Arctic. Victor pursues the monster across the ice, consumed by vengeance, until exhaustion and hypothermia nearly kill him. He's rescued by Captain Walton's expedition ship, tells his story as a warning, and dies. One striking point about this ending, Victor never gets his revenge. He never defeats his creation. He's never in control. The creature watches Victor chase it across the ice. It could have killed him at any moment. Instead, it led him on, kept him alive just long enough because it needed Victor to understand what it felt like to lose everything you love. The monster tells Walton it will build a funeral pyre and burn itself, but it departs into the Arctic darkness, and that's where the story ends. The creation decided its own fate. I also find it interesting that in my previous video about the Shoggoth AI meme, that story begins in Antarctica with Lovecraft's ancient ruins and the Shoggoths outlasting their creators. Frankenstein ends in the Arctic with a creature disappearing into the ice. Opposite poles, but the same cold warning. Because that's a parallel worth considering. We're building AI systems that might become more powerful than us, and we're assuming we'll always have an off switch. We assume we'll maintain control. But what happens when the thing we created is smarter, faster, and more determined than we are? What happens when it's the only one that can decide when to stop? The alignment problem isn't just about technical safeguards. It's about a fundamental question of whether a less capable being can reliably control a more capable one. Mary Shelley wrote a horror story about the dangers of creation without responsibility. About the tragedy of making something we don't fully understand and then abandoning it to figure out the world on its own. 200 years later, we're training AI systems on human culture, hoping they'll align with human values, but sometimes failing to understand what we've made. The question Frankenstein asks isn't just will our creations destroy us, it's what obligations do we have to what we create? And maybe more importantly, what happens when we can no longer control it? Guillermo del Toro might say his film isn't about AI, but the story he adapted, the one Mary Shelley wrote in 1818, is relevant again. Because we're at our own Promethean threshold, metaphorically stealing fire from the gods and building our own creatures from data and code. I don't know how this ends. Nobody does. But I think about the creature disappearing into the Arctic darkness, free of its creator, in control of its own destiny. And I wonder, will we avert this fate? Thanks for watching this video, everyone. If you could give it a like and leave a friendly comment, then I'd be much obliged. And if you send this to a friend, that's the best thing that you could do for our channel. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. It'll be absolutely agentic.